Welcome to Margin Notes from the Central Church of Christ in Paducah, Kentucky. As you can see on your screen, this video will cover an introduction to the book of Joshua. We're glad that you have joined us this video. This is our first video to be released in the year 2023. And if you are new to Margin Notes, for one thing, we've taken a little bit of a break. We took some time off around the holidays because we were at a stopping point, but also, frankly, to give us a little bit of time to do some other things. But if you're new to Margin Notes, all the title gives away what it is. These are some notes that I have in the margin of my Bible, and you may find some of these helpful along the way. And if you are new, we have done several books of the Bible already. So if you scroll back up through YouTube or Facebook, we release these videos on both those outlets. You can find videos. The series began with just some random notes from all over the Bible, but then we began to become more systematic in it. And you can find videos that go through the entire books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, as well as the New Testament books of Philemon, 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John, and there's also a brief series on the first 25 Psalms. So we have covered a pretty good chunk of the Bible. Our plan is, as you see here, we're beginning the book of Joshua today on this video, but this series will cover, the next few videos will cover Joshua, Judges, and Ruth will be the next three books that we cover in videos. The book of Joshua will be 4 videos followed by a review video where we just recap all the slides. Then the book of Judges will follow. I haven't yet set how many videos that will be. I believe it will be either 3 or 4, followed by a recap video, and then Ruth will likely just be 1 video. But again, that hasn't been decided yet. But we'll begin today with the book of Joshua. This video will be very brief because we're just doing the introduction, and if you followed these videos before, you know that we don't do a ton of introductory material, but I wanted to take Joshua, the text of the book of Joshua, in sort of natural segments. And so the first of those being about 4 or 5 chapters. I thought it'd be helpful just to do a shorter introduction video and then, begin with the text of Joshua in the next video. And I do apologize. I'm fighting off a little bit of a cold, so if I cough a little bit, I just apologize. But hey, we press forward. These aren't the greatest high quality videos anyways. If I cough a little bit like that, just understand that's what's going on. So here we go, some notes for the introduction to Joshua, and I write these just in the pages before the text in my copy of the Bible that I put notes in. Here are the questions we typically answer. First of all, who wrote it? Well, you can find a lot of disagreement on this actually. What I typically go with on these, I do not claim to be a scholar of things like textual criticism or those types of things. I typically go with sort of the common answer. So you may find some scholars who disagree. In fact, it wouldn't be all that hard to find some scholars who disagree with the fact that Joshua himself wrote the book. But there are a couple of references, as you see on your screen there in chapter 5, that seem to make it clear that he wrote the book. Or, as I said, it is also possible that Joshua himself may not have actually written the book, but that someone, a scribe under his direction, wrote it. That seems to be the consensus, is either Joshua wrote it or someone under his direction. There are other views, again, you can find them, but that seems to be the most logical, the most straightforward. That's what I go with. I'm a very simple person as far as these things go, so that's what I go with. Who was it written to? Well, initially, of course, being an Old Testament book, being a book for the nation of Israel, it was written to them to remind them of the events, to remind them of the conquest. We'll get to the purpose of the book in just a few moments. And if you wanted to put even beyond that, that later the book was then expanded to the nation to remind them further, et cetera, et cetera. But the initial audience seems to be to just remind them of what happened, why they were successful when they were successful, why they were not successful when they weren't successful throughout this the events of the conquest of the Promised Land. And that ties to the third thing there you see on the screen, when the book was written. If Joshua is the author, and again I believe it is, it would likely be very near the end of his life, about 1400 BC. Now, here is where you'll find some disagreement, obviously, because the very end of the book does contain the fact that Joshua dies, so Joshua would have to write about his own death, which would be possible. It would be possible that God inspired Joshua to write about what was getting ready to happen if Joshua did, in fact, write this very near the end of his life. It's also possible, of course, that a scribe under Joshua's direction finished out the text. It is also possible, and I grant it, that someone else wrote the final chapter or chapters dealing with the very, very late life of Joshua. They would have been inspired of God, of course. It doesn't make that much difference. But that's one of the places you will find some disagreement is, okay, if Joshua wrote about his own death, that's a little weird. And it would be weird to us. But of course, it would also be something that is perfectly understandable if it was written very near the end of Joshua's life. These are the most straightforward answers. Again, you can agree to disagree. I'm not a textual critic in those sorts of ways. I don't have the Hebrew skills to study these things more deeply, but these make the most sense to me, and most scholars that I've consulted seem to agree in the main with these basic facts. The purpose of the book, of course, there are many ways you could word this, many others you could come up with. The way that I summarize the book is this: it's to show how faithfulness to God's laws, you may change the word laws to something like directives, because it wasn't necessarily just the laws found in Exodus, but specifically the laws of conquest. So maybe something like directives or commands to show how faithfulness to God's laws led to victory in the promised land. Now, are there others? Yes, because there are times when there was not faithfulness and they lost battles. For example, with the first battle at Ai in Joshua chapter 7 with Achan and others. So there are negative purposes as well. But the overall purpose of the book seems to be to remind the people, look, when you were faithful, you ran roughshod over the promised land because God was with you. And any way you want to word something like that, I think will be a very effective way of describing the purpose of this beautiful book. Obviously, the book is an Old Testament book. You may not choose to write that down. It's obvious, but I just like to have it. I have the room, excuse me, to put these things in the margin of my Bible, so why not include those two words just to remind myself I'm dealing with something before the New Testament. And then the periods, if you're new to margin notes, Brother Andy Kaiser many years ago wrote a book called The 15 Periods of Bible History, a wonderful little study book. You could literally read the book cover to cover in probably 40 minutes or 45 minutes. But the way he has the Bible divided up into 15 periods is so very helpful. The book of Joshua falls under two of the periods. The way he has it, the wilderness wanderings cover the first three chapters because they haven't come into the promised land yet. And so the wilderness wanderings have begun, of course, in the book of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and now that period will close in that opening section of the book of Joshua. And then, of course, the next major section of the Bible is the conquest of the promised land itself, and that will run from Joshua 4 through Joshua chapter 24, the end of the book. So a couple of those 15 periods, as Brother Kaiser has them divided up, are found. One ends and one is contained, I guess is the best way to put that, in this book. We always like to give an outline or two. I have two for you for this book. Both are quite similar, but each one has a little bit different emphasis. This one is my favorite one. It's actually the one we're going to use for our videos. As far as the sections, we're going to we're going to do chapters 1 through 4, chapters 5 through 12, and then chapters 13 through 24 for the 3 text videos on Joshua. But this outline divides the book of Joshua into 3 sections, as you see there, sort of a rhyming outline: preparation, subjection, and possession. So section 1 is preparation, and you could just add preparation for entering Canaan if you wanted to. I like the colon there because it makes it just a very neat outline with each of the 3 sections. So preparation, where they prepare to and then enter Canaan in chapters 1 through 4. And again, if you want to change this to the promised land instead of Canaan, that would also be a way to word this. Section 2, subjection, that's where they conquer Canaan, the victories, and yes, some defeats, but for the most part, victories when they're faithful to God and they win victory after victory, beginning at Jericho, but going all through the promised land. That will run from the beginning of chapter 5 through, as you see there, the opening verses of chapter 13. And then the final section, possession, dividing Canaan. For many people, this is the most difficult part of the book as far as just reading it because it's a lot of geography. A lot of this group of people lived here. A lot of um, this tribe of Israel took this particular one, and it is sometimes tedious reading, but it's also a very important part of the book. As you see, it's a massive section of the book, basically half the book, nearly so, from chapter 13 and verse 8 through the end of the book, chapter 24, verse 33. Now, if you wanted to make this just a clean break and put 5 through 12 and 13 through 24, that's perfectly acceptable, I suppose. But I found this outline. Actually, this is a combination of a couple outlines. I found one that had the same 1 through 4, 5 1 through 13 7, and 13 8 through 24 33. And one of them was just the three rhyming words: preparation, subjection, and possession. The other one was entering, conquering, inviting. And I just smashed them together. I thought that that's a kind of a good way of putting that outline together. But that's just a very simple outline. The other outline I give to you is just 2 points. But I like it also because it gives the time outline of the book. You have here just what happens, but the second outline, which does make that clean break between chapter 12 and chapter 13, gives the time. Point 1 is 7 years of securing the land, obviously coming in and winning battles and so forth. Point 2 then is 18 years of settling the land, where the tribes spread out and do other things from chapter 13 through verse 24. Now, you may choose, you don't have to use any of these notes, obviously, but you may choose not to include this one as an outline, but you may want to put before chapter 1, something like chapters 1 through 12 covers 7 years, and before chapter 13 have a follow-up note, chapters 13 through 24 covers 18 years, something like that. And these are basically correct. In other words, it's probably not to the day 7 years and to the day 18 years, but it gives some idea. And frankly, this may just show my Bible ignorance. If it does, I apologize for that. I did not quite realize that the second half of the book, if you please, was that much longer, excuse me, time-wise, than the first half of the book. And I think it's just because there is so much action in those first 12 chapters, battles and so forth, and then, frankly, just so much tedium in the second portion of the book. But time-wise, the second half, basically, of the book is, as you see there, quite a bit longer, about 2.5 times longer than the first half of the book. The other thing we'll mention here by way of introduction are some key words. Obviously, you can find other key words in the book of Joshua. I have these 3. The first is simply the word land. Now, as you see there, according to my count, and I found this count online, I tried to check it as I went through reading the book of Joshua, and I say I tried because this is one of the few times where I've shown you this on these videos before. You may remember it, where I go through and highlight or actually use a Crayola twistable of a certain color for these key words. I did not do that with the word land, simply because it is found so many times. 84 times. Again, I found that number online. As I read through the book of Joshua, I tried to count, and that was the number I came up with then as well. It may be 83, it may be 85, it's around there somewhere, but 84 times. You may want to mark it, underline it, or square it in, or color it. That's fine. I just chose not to, simply because of the sheer volume of it being that many times. Usually a key word, as you see these other times, 15, 20, 30 times. 84 is just a lot, especially for a book that's only 24 chapters long. If it was 84 times in Isaiah or something, might not be that big of a deal, but 84 times this book is just everywhere. The second key word that I have for the book is the word inheritance. I put the Hebrew word there for this, not to show off. I don't know Hebrew. Okay, I can't even pronounce that word correctly, probably. The reason I do that is in some translations, you might find a different word that's translated from that Hebrew word. I believe it's Nahalah, than inheritance. And so if you know how to study these things on Blue Letter Bible or through an interlinear or something like that, you may go through and mark that Hebrew word, but it's found 50 times in the book of Joshua, and that makes sense considering what this book is about. And then the other key word is the word covenant. I'll mention something specific about it in just a moment, which you see there is found 22 times. One of the things about that word covenant to keep in mind is that a lot of those instances occur in a very short section of the book where it's tied to the Ark of the Covenant. And so you may not want to mark that one just for that reason, because it's not always a covenant God made with his people, or a covenant God made with Joshua, or things. It's Ark of the Covenant. And that can, I don't want to say excuse the number because it's still found 22 times, but it's used in such a specific way a good number of those times that you may find that to not be as helpful. I do, you may not. That's fine. We can agree to disagree on that one. But those are key words as I see them. You may think of others. You may notice others. There are plenty in a book this long, in a book with this much, again, action, especially in the first half of the book. There are quite a number of repeating words. But these three, to me, if you put those three things together, you kind of have the story of the book of Joshua. It's the promised land, it's the inheritance God has promised his people, and it's a covenant, or the Ark of the Covenant with God's presence. That was key to their success, their victories throughout the book. So there are some introductory notes. I said this is a little bit shorter video because we're just doing the introduction. Next time on Margin Notes, we will cover the first 4 chapters of Joshua and that preparation section, dealing with them getting ready to enter the promised land. We hope these notes help you every time. Welcome to 2023. I don't know how long we're going to continue to do these, but we're going to continue to do Joshua, Judges, and Ruth for sure. I've enjoyed the study a great deal, and I hope that you find these videos to be encouraging to your Bible study as well. And as always, we hope these videos help you to read the Bible, study the Bible, and live the Bible. Thanks for watching.